transfers and contracts because things are ramping up. I mean, it is only about 3 weeks until transfer window 1 opens on the 1st of June. And this isn't a new name. It feels like a boomerang style name, I'm going to call it. We're coming back round to it. So Jeremy Frimpong, Leverkusen, homegrown, right wing back, you'd probably say, can also play right wing. It seemed almost on Friday night as the embargo dropped, a concerted briefing, many of the patch journos mentioning Jeremy Frimpong will be of interest to Liverpool. Had anything on it yourself? Heard anything more on this one at all?
Yeah, it's a funny one, this. I'm kind of umming and ahhing about how to kind of place this. I had a conversation this week whereby someone who I would implicitly trust and as a source kind of said to me that they would be surprised, to be honest, if this happened. And I understand that quite a few reporters have mentioned the name, but I think there's a lot to kind of take from kind of how it's being mentioned and context and the way this is being written. So this isn't me. Please don't take this as me doing down any other journalists or throwing doubt on anything they've written, because I think what they've written is correct. I think it's the way it's being interpreted is maybe incorrect in that, you know, I would totally accept that Liverpool would see Frimpong as an option that's out there, that's available. You know, the fee is very, very cheap for a player with a high level of experience. He's homegrown as well, so loads of factors to like about him. And I also think from the player's side, I think we're seeing a clear push that he will be very, very much open to the move. But I think the reason that it's been said to me that someone would be surprised if it would happen is that I don't know whether that's kind of Liverpool banging down Leverkusen's door to get the deal done. I think it may be something they turn to in the end if the market doesn't work out the way they want to. The kind of the concerns about Conor Bradley's injury history are there, and they think it's enough to maybe do the deal if Frimpong would be happy with the role he was given. But I've just not got this impression that they're absolutely desperate to do it. And I think there are other options they would maybe look at to kind of, you know, secure that right back spot. And, you know, maybe that would be a centre half who can play out there and give Conor Bradley the games. And, you know, maybe that will be the approach. But I'm not massively convinced that Frimpong will end up signing for Liverpool as things stand. I think it's an option for Liverpool. They know it's an appealing option and an easy one to do. But I kind of want to, I'm probably going to put my neck on the line a little bit here and say I trust that source implicitly, and I don't think he will sign for Liverpool as things stand.
Will be interesting to see who the right back enforcement, if there is a right back enforcement. But the other one who really came into the mix, Vanderson, Brazilian, quite young at Monaco. So L'Equipe mentioned him, and not really too many suggestions from the UK. Heard anything on that name at all?
No, nothing outside of kind of, he is definitely someone who will be being watched in terms of profile and age and league he's playing in, but nothing kind of further beyond that. I guess Liverpool have got a big decision to make around this, don't they, in terms of what is Conor Bradley's role for next season and how do you split that with someone else? Is it, you know, do you bring in someone older who can kind of back him up as an experienced option? Do you sign the centre half that you signed who is able to play at right back? Do you persist with Quanta there? They've got some kind of big decisions to make around this. And so a lot of these options are kind of on the table. But as I say, whether that will culminate, the only thing I can kind of say is that I'm not massively convinced that culminates in signing a right wing back who has essentially spent the last couple of seasons playing as a right winger, to be honest.
Yeah, it is an interesting one to see how that develops. And I mean, the other side of the pitch at left back, these names just keep being the same a little bit. Aït-Nouri mentioned and referenced in a few articles with a new agency there as well. And also, well, Milos Kerkez, it's important to say, a few had him today as a strong favourite. It's been pitched in a few articles. Still think it still feels like it's going to be Kerkez or Aït-Nouri a bit, doesn't it?
I still feel like left backs up for debate. I don't think you could hang your hat on anyone. As I say, I've always been of the thingy that Aït-Nouri is still in the mix. I think I said that a few weeks ago. I don't think that that's kind of been ruled out just yet. And the fact he's changing agency amid talks that Wolves want to tie him down to a new contract, that kind of rings alarm bells for me in terms of there's a real possibility then that they accept if he doesn't sign a new contract, they will have to do a deal this summer. And they've also put out what his kind of fee would be to get him. So, you know, he remains to me a really interesting option that I think it would be foolish to rule out at this point. I think yeah, that's one of a few there. So the only thing I would say around that is, I know Kirk is definitely on the list and he's up there, but not absolutely nailed on maybe in the way that is being suggested. So again, we will kind of see how they progress with that.
Would we, and people have referenced this as well, because almost we know the top 7, the Champions League places is done. It's just all scrapping for who ends up where. So a lot of clubs like Bournemouth, Brentford, Brighton, their season's almost finished a little bit in terms of what they can achieve too much. So do you think with that in mind, we might start seeing things advance in the next week or so? Because we'd heard that Liverpool wanted to be respectful to Bournemouth, but Bournemouth can't qualify for Europe now. So do you think we might start getting a bit more this week or so?
I think with Bournemouth, is it not right that they are slightly still in contention because of where the European spots might end up going down to with the FA Cup final, possibly? Yeah. So we will kind of have to see with that. I just wonder whether they're going to kind of, I just think that the end of the season makes more sense before we start seeing things. I think in terms of, respectfulness, and even if you're not necessarily competing for anything, I still think it makes more sense to kind of hang on a little bit before making any moves. But that early window is definitely in contention for someone like a Dean Huijsen. That to me looks certain that he will get a really firm idea in terms of where he's going. So there can be some early business done, but I just don't think we'll hear anything concrete before the season's up.
Yeah, I mean, he was going to be the next name. There's a Dean Huijsen, Liverpool or Chelsea, Arsenal story every week, but it does feel like it's intrinsically linked with the deafening silence around anything progressing with Ibou Konate, doesn't it? That just seems very quiet in the worst sense right now as well.
Yeah, but do you know what? Personally, I don't really see this as I know some journalists have kind of linked it, and I've kind of maybe done it myself when I've talked about the centre-half situation as a whole, but I don't necessarily see, and I don't think Liverpool see Huijsen as a Konate replacement. He doesn't make sense in those terms. In terms of what you would lose in terms of experience and aerial duel success. Liverpool, if they lost Konate this summer and they made the decision to sell him immediately to Real Madrid or whatever, they would have to replace him with someone who is first team ready. Huijsen is someone who needs a little bit of looking after and building up, and he can't come in and replace Konate. Or I could say that as good as he is and as big a talent he is, Liverpool would be significantly worse next season because he isn't of Konate's level just yet. So I don't think those two are kind of inextricably linked, and I think this is a deal that Liverpool still want to do. They're still in contention for, but the players got to kind of hit the green light to one of the clubs that's involved, and we don't quite know who that's going to be yet.
Yeah, again, something that we'll find out in the next few weeks.
Just to jump in, by the way, I see in the comments kind of people saying Lynch said Frimpong's a no-go. I didn't kind of say that. I said, let's please use this in context. This is the problem with talking about transfers and talking honestly. It's so risky, and we end up putting our reputations at risk by talking about it in an honest way. In that, I'm not saying that it's not possible. He's definitely they see that as a deal that can definitely be done and is easy to do. They know all the conditions are there. They know that the player will want to do it. But I wouldn't necessarily say, and judging by people I've spoken to, that he's right at the top of the list. And it's not, I'm not saying it's not happening. It's definitely possible that Liverpool can get in a situation where they look at the market and think, do you know what? That's the best we can do there. That's probably worthwhile doing. He's happy with the role that we would give him, blah, 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 and move forward with it. But I'm just not as convinced in the same way that everybody else is that Liverpool are signing Frimpong. I'm not saying that I would disagree with, and doesn't kind of tally with what I'm hearing. And I think there are other options he would prefer to go to. So, let's kind of see what happens with that. But, let's interpret it as the way I'm kind of trying to communicate it. Yeah. These things are complex, and I don't want to strip all nuance out and now say Lynch says absolutely no chance Frimpong signs. He's rubbish, blah blah. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I would believe wholeheartedly that the person I was talking to said that they would be surprised. I too would be surprised, but it's there, and the deal could be done, and Liverpool have it as an option to be done if they feel that that's the right way to go down.
Yeah, and also it's important to say there's a lot of names coming out now all of a sudden around right back, like Frimpong, Vanderson, who we mentioned, Wesley at Flamengo. There's been a lot of talk about those positions. So, yeah, there's nothing that we can be certain on at all. And speaking of things you can't be certain on, Frankfurt, I don't know if we're just almost various headlines with them, but Bild in Germany saying that Ekitike's name comes back up as a forward. Hugo Larsson, another name that almost feels like it's coming back up. Endo possibly even going there. Does this just feel like an easy link for a journalist or Bild to put together in some way, or do you think there's anything in it at all?
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I've not personally heard anything on this one, so I can't really vouch for this one. But it's interesting that I think if they were to kind of sign, if Endo was to come at the end of the season and say he wants to go, which I think is on the table as a possibility, we don't concretely know yet, but I think it's in play as a possibility, that the ideal replacement for him really would be kind of someone young who you can mold, someone who will be kind of happy with Endo minutes and still think that's enough, but who is talented and can become a big player in the future. I think that would be kind of an ideal situation for Liverpool to put themselves in. And he's not the only midfielder of that kind of age bracket that we've heard of who's being linked. So that kind of those kind of links, as I say, I've not heard anything personally on this one. They do make a little bit of sense to me.
Yeah, could well be a price element there. And this name, people will be desperate for you to hype up. Rodrigo, Real Madrid, left out the lineup, wasn't he, for El Clasico? A lot of talk from the Spanish camps that he will be on the move, that Real Madrid will be looking to cash in, if that's the right phrase. Anything we've heard around Liverpool and Rodrigo at all?
I've only ever known that they kind of have liked him in the past. That doesn't always mean that they'll kind of like him in the future. Because I mean, I've heard that so many times where stuff has been said in the past about a player being liked by Liverpool, and everyone's like they hold on to that for years. Then, so I always think the really good example of this is Christian Pulisic, where Liverpool did like him that summer, and then it didn't happen, and he stayed at Dortmund for a little bit longer, and then eventually he just ends up signing for Chelsea, and because he hadn't kicked on in the way that Liverpool thought he might, and it wasn't at that point a deal that they thought was worth doing. So I always thought that's a really good example. So I'm not quite sure what the current feeling is around Rodrigo and whether that interest is still there. He's obviously still very young and puts up decent numbers. But of course, if he's a Real Madrid cast off, is that necessarily where Liverpool want to go? Or do they think it's kind of a Gravenberch situation where they've misjudged it or whatever? Yeah. I don't know that one at the moment. But I would, as I say, you can't always guarantee that they will like a player forever. So not really sure with that one.
Yeah. You feel that it's going to be a big fee and big wages for whoever gets him. So we'll see if there's anything in that one down the line. And we should talk about our existing players, because I know people are watching him recently, but the stories with Darwin Nunez continue, don't they? Napoli, we've heard the Atletico links, Saudi even stories around for the 1st of June and have him in place for the Club World Cup. We've talked about the importance of a number 9. Does Darwin hold a large part of the key to our summer and where he ends up going, essentially?
Yeah, not necessarily where, maybe, mate, but I think just the fact that he is going is a crucial part of it. I think one thing you can say is he's guaranteed to go. Yeah. He's willing to go. There's so much interest out there, and potential for a bidding war. And the fact he'd be happy to go to Saudi is pretty helpful, really, in terms of boosting the coffers as well. And if that's the one that he ends up opting for. So, I think the fact is, and the fact there's interest as well that could be wrapped up early is so helpful for Liverpool. If they can get him off the books in that kind of the early June window, then, absolutely brilliant for them in terms of planning the window and seeing what that looks like, and knowing then we can progress on a centre forward. This is perfect. We're going to have the funds to do that immediately before even thinking about other signings. So, it's a pretty ideal situation to be in with that one, in that they've got a player who doesn't work for them, but many other clubs think he can work for them and will pay a decent fee for him. So yeah, they're in a good situation with that one. And I think it's one of the few certainties of the window, really, is that Darwin Nunez will definitely leave. It's one of the ones who've been able to trail for months and months that he will be going, because there is that strong interest in him there.
Yeah, it might be even one that you feel could be very early in the window. We'll have to see on that one. But other existing players, Luis Díaz, we've talked about him and his contract, but Obviously, quotes from this morning, Luis Díaz saying, for me, I would stay at Liverpool, however many years it takes. It also depends on the club, everything. These are the details that are sorted out separately. Also talked from those serialized quotes about wanting to stay, wanting to speak at the end of the season. It still feels a bit up in the air with Diaz, isn't it? Before everyone gets high on this, like 28 years old, if you're going to cash in on him, now's the time, isn't it? Maybe I'm wrong on this, but I just don't put sort of these quotes as he's definitely staying.
No, absolutely not. I think these quotes are showing that he wants a new deal and a pay rise, absolutely. And I still get no impression really that Liverpool are absolutely desperate to give him one. Personally, I mean, it wouldn't really make sense to massively extend his contract when he is 28 and you may be seeing the best years of him at the moment. And it's an area in attack where they think they can upgrade. So, again, I had a conversation yesterday at Anfield that made me think that the kind of all possibilities are on the table with Diaz. He could go if the right bid comes in. But equally, if you're already losing Nunez, maybe Chiesa goes early in the window as well. Yeah. It suddenly starts to really add up. So again, managing turnover is a factor here. And I just think personally, and I think I've said this before, is that my ideal situation, I think, for Liverpool is to just do one more year of Diaz. He's flexible. He can play in multiple positions. Great hard worker and a good player who's had a good season. But you don't want to be giving him a pay rise, and he's on cheap wages at the moment. So do one more year, and then maybe everyone can kind of that's when you cash in for slightly less, but you've got another season to manage the transition. I just think that makes sense for everyone really to do one more season. Well, probably doesn't make sense for Diaz, who would love that pay rise, but I think that's kind of the sensible approach in this whole situation. And I do think managing turnover has to be a factor in this summer, because Liverpool are going to have no chance of winning the title if they sell 7 or 8 for me. So Diaz, it's a possibility, but I think others would have to stay who maybe didn't want to. And like I say, I think ideal situation is maybe he does one more year.
Yeah, it does build. If he is going to go, it's got to be for someone who comes in who's going to bona fide start, and you'd look and go, I get why they've made that deal. That's a quality player. I understand that. So sometimes easier said than done. But we'll see what this week brings with more rumours, transfers and contract talk.